You boys look at that mountain, and you see a paycheck. You see a weekend off. You see a new truck in the driveway. Sit down. You don't see what I see. I look at that ridge, and I see a tombstone. You think you're invincible because you got those fancy sensors and those hydraulic supports. The mountain doesn't care about your technology. The mountain waits. It waits until you get comfortable. It waits until you forget to be afraid. Let me tell you about the time the mountain decided to speak up. It was the winter of '74 when I was 24. I took the cage down to the number 9 seam, and I didn't know I was walking into a grave. ... double quotes, ease up there, rookies. Grab a crate, sit on the steps. Don't mind the dust. Hey, if you're going to work in this town, you better get used to the taste of it. It gets in your water, your clothes, and eventually it settles right in your chest. They call it black gold, but I reckon it's more like a curse we dug up and sold by the ton. I see you boys laughing about your shift today, complaining about the heat, complaining that the conveyor belt got stuck for 10 minutes. Let me tell you something. Got lights that turn night into day down there. You got air pumped in so fresh it smells like spring rain. You got radios to talk to the surface. In my day, the only radio we had was shouting down the tunnel. The only light we had was the carbide lamp on our helmet or the battery pack on our hip, and if that died, you were in a darkness so thick you could choke on it, a darkness that had weight. You young bloods, you respect the money, but you don't respect the rock. The rock is alive, it breathes, it settles, and if you steal enough from it, it gets angry. I learned that lesson the hard way. I learned it when I thought I was the toughest thing on 2 legs. The old miner leans forward, the rocking chair stops. That was back in 1974. When I was 24, I was working the graveyard shift at the old Black Mountain Pit. I was young. I was engaged to be married to a girl named Sarah, and I thought I was going to live forever. I was wrong. I remember the morning of that shift like it was 5 minutes ago. It was November. The wind-up here in the hollows cuts right through you. That time of year, I kissed Sarah goodbye at the door. She was fixing her hair, looking in that little cracked mirror we had in the hallway. She told me to be careful. I gave her the same answer I always did. The devil can't catch a man who's too fast for him. I walked down the gravel road to the tipple, my lunch pail swinging in my hand. Inside, I had 2 ham biscuits and a thermos of black coffee. That was fuel for 10 hours of breaking your back. The locker room, the dry house we called, it smelled like wet wool, stale tobacco, and sweat that never quite washed out. That's where I met up with Big Davy. Now Davy was my partner. He was a giant of a man, stood 6'4", hands the size of shovels. He was older than me, maybe 40. He had 3 kids and a laugh that could shake the dust off the rafters. "Ready to scratch the itch, Silas?" he asked me. It's what we called mining. Scratching the earth's itch. Got our tags brass checks with our numbers on them. You hung one on the board so they knew you were down there. If you didn't come up, that brass tag was the only thing that said you were missing. We piled into the cage the elevator. It wasn't like the smooth rides you have now. It was a rattle-trap iron box dangling on a steel cable. When the hoistman dropped that lever, your stomach stayed at the surface while the rest of you plummeted 1,000 feet down. The air gets different when you pass the 300-foot mark. It gets heavy, humid, it smells of sulfur and old water. We hit the bottom, the gate clanged open, and we stepped out into the bottom. From there, it was a 2-mile ride on a man-trip car, and then a mile walk to the face. When I was 24, I worked on a timbering crew. Our job was to follow the continuous miner machine and shore up the roof. We set huge wooden post oak and hickory to keep the mountain from coming down on our heads. It was hard work, swinging a sledgehammer in a tunnel that was only 4 feet high. Spent your whole life on your knees or bent double. We were working the number 9 seam. It was a wet section. Water dripped constantly from the roof. Cold black water. It turned the floor into a sludge that sucked at your boots. Every step was a battle, but we were making good tonnage. The coal was pouring out. Davy and I were in a rhythm. He'd set the post, I'd drive the wedge. Thwack, thwack. The sound of the hammer was the only thing you heard over the hum of the ventilation fans. We didn't talk much. You didn't need to. You knew where your buddy was by the way the shadows moved. We stopped for lunch around 2 a.m. We sat on a pile of cribbing blocks. Turning off our headlamps to save battery, we sat in the absolute dark, eating our ham biscuits. Davy was talking about his youngest girl, how she needed braces. He was picking up extra shifts to pay for M. Silas, he said to me in the dark, you marry that girl of yours, don't wait. Life's too short to wait on the good parts. I laughed at him, told him he was getting sentimental in his old age. I wish I hadn't laughed. Around 3:30 a.m., things changed. You know how the air feels right before a thunderstorm? The pressure drops? It felt like that, but underground. My ears popped. I looked at Davy. He had stopped swinging his hammer. He was looking up at the roof. The straight at the layers of rock above us usually made noise. They groaned and creaked. We called it working, but this was different. The mine went silent. Even the rats were gone. You boys might hate rats, but a miner loves them. If you see rats running toward the exit, you better be right behind them. I looked around the wall of coal and I didn't see a single whiskered nose. Silas, Davy whispered. The air stopped. He was right. The canvas brattice cloth, which guided the fresh air to us, was usually flapping. Now it hung dead still. The ventilation had cut out. That meant one thing: gas was building up. Methane. Fire damp. It's odorless, tasteless, and invisible, and it loves to explode. We started packing our gear. Fast. No panic. Just efficient movement. We knew the drill. Head for the main haulageway. Get into the fresh air intake. But we were deep, boys. We were 3 miles from the shaft. It hadn't gone 50 yards when I heard it. Out it sounded like a shotgun blast, followed by the sound of a freight train coming off the tracks. It was the roof snapping. Not just a layer of slate, but the main roof. The mountain was letting go. Run, Davy roared. We scrambled over the conveyor belt, slipping in the mud. The sound behind us was deafening, a grinding. Its tearing roar as thousands of tons of rock collapsed into the space we had just vacated. The wind from the collapsed air blast hit us like a physical blow. It knocked me flat on my face, filling my mouth with coal dust. I scrambled up, coughing, my light flickering. Davy, I screamed. Move, kid, move, he yelled back. He was right behind me. We made it to a cross-cut tunnel, connecting to main entries. We dove in just as the main tunnel behind us slammed shut. The ceiling didn't just fall, it zippered shut. 1 second it was a tunnel, the next it was a solid wall of rock. We were alive. But we were on the wrong side of the fall. The dust was so thick, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I pulled my shirt up over my nose, trying to filter the air. I could hear Davy wheezing next to me. You all right, Pops? I asked, using his nickname. My leg, he grunted. Twisted it. But I'm breathing. We waited for the dust to settle. It took an hour. When it cleared, we shone our lights around. We were in a pocket. It's maybe 30 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 4 feet high. Both ends were blocked by massive slabs of sandstone. We were trapped. When I was 24, I found out what claustrophobia really is. It's not fear of small spaces. It's the knowledge that the space is getting smaller. The first few hours weren't so bad. We had adrenaline. Checked the walls for a way out. Tapped on the roof with a wrench tap. Tapped the universal miner's signal. We listened. Nothing but the dripping of water. Then the reality set in. We checked our supplies. I had a half flask of water. Davy had nothing. His lunch pail was lost in the scramble. We had our cap lamps, but batteries back then only lasted about 8 to 10 hours max. We had to conserve. Lights out, Davy said. We sit in the dark. Save the juice for when we hear them coming. So we turn them off. That darkness, it enters you. It's heavy. You lose track of where your body ends and the cold begins. You start to see things, flashes of color that aren't there. We sat there for what felt like a day, but my watch said it was only 6 hours. The air started to get bad. It's not methane this time. Carbon dioxide. Black damp. We were using up the oxygen in that small pocket. My head started to throb. My limbs felt heavy, like lead. "Tell me about the wedding," Davy whispered in the dark. His voice was getting weak. So I told him I described the dress Sarah was going to wear. I described the church. I described the cake. I talked until my throat was so dry I couldn't speak. I was trying to keep us both awake. If you fall asleep in bad air, you don't wake up. When I was 24, I had to become a man I didn't know I could be. I crawled over to Davy. He was shivering. It gets cold when the air stops moving. I huddled next to him, sharing body heat. "Silas," he said, his voice slurring. "You gotta promise me something." "Save your breath, Davy," I rasped. "No. Listen, if it comes down to it, if they break through and there's only time for one, you got Sarah? My kids, they're mostly grown. You got a life to start." I got angry then. "Shut up, old man. We're both walking out of here." But the mountain had other plans. We heard a groan from above. The roof over our heads cracked. A slab the size of a kitchen table came down right between us, pinning Davy's bad leg. He screamed a sound that still wakes me up at night 50 years later. I turned my light on. The dust swirled. Davy was pinned. The rock was too heavy. I threw my shoulder against it. I pushed until the veins in my neck bulged. I pushed until I saw stars. It wouldn't budge. "Leave it," Davy gasped. It was pale, sweat cutting tracks through the coal dust on his face. "Save the light." I sat with him. The water was rising now. That seepage from the floor was filling our little pocket. It was up to our ankles, then our shins. It was cold, black, oily water. We were running out of air. I could feel myself drifting. It was peaceful in a way. The headache started to fade, replaced by a warm numbness. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the sun. I hallucinated that I was back on my porch just like I am now, and I heard it thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the mountain. It was rhythmic. It was a drill. I shook Davy. "Davy, you hear that? They're coming." He didn't answer. His head was slumped on his chest. I screamed. I banged my wrench against the rock until my hands bled. Clang, clang. "We're here, here." The drilling got louder. It sounded like angels singing, boys. A small pilot bit broke through the rock wall about 10 feet away. A hiss of air rushed in, fresh, compressed air. I put my face to that hole and drank it in like water. "Davy, wake up, air." I scrambled back to him. He groaned. He was still with me, but barely. It took the rescue team another 2 hours to widen the hole enough to crawl through. When the beam of a rescue light hit my face, it was blinding. Couldn't see who it was, just a silhouette in a halo of light. "We got survivors," the voice yelled. It was the foreman. They crawled in. They saw Davy pinned. They brought in hydraulic jacks, heavy portable ones. They lifted that rock off him. His leg was a mess, crushed bad. They put him on a skid stretcher. The tunnel they had dug was narrow, barely big enough for a man to crawl. "Take him first," I yelled. "Get him out." They dragged Davy out. I followed, crawling on my belly through the mud, scraping my back on the jagged rock. Then looked back at that tomb. I just kept my eyes on the boots of the man in front of me. The ride up the cage was a blur. But I remember hitting the surface. It was nighttime. The stars were out. I'd never seen stars look so bright. They looked like diamonds spilled on black velvet. There were ambulances waiting. Women were crying by the gate. I saw Sarah. She broke through the line of company guards and ran to me. She didn't care that I was covered in muck, blood, and coal dust. She held me so tight I thought she'd break my ribs. I looked over at the other ambulance. They were loading Davy. He gave me a thumbs up. A weak one, but a thumbs up. The old miner leans back in his chair, rubbing his knees. Davy lost that leg. Never went underground again. But he lived to see his grandkids. He lived to sit on a porch just like this one. Psh, me. I went back down 2 weeks later, because that's what we did. That's what we do, but I was different. When I was 24, I went into that mine a boy, and I came out an old man. The cold didn't just stain my skin, it stained my soul. It taught me that nothing is promised. Not the next breath, not the next sunrise. So you young bloods, you listen to me? When you go down there tomorrow, watch out for your brother. Respect the mountain. When you come back up, when you see that sky, don't you dare take it for granted. You hug your wife, you call your mama. Guess down there in the dark, the only thing that matters is the people waiting for you in the light. Now get out of here. Go on. I'm tired, and my coffee's getting cold.